Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. I'm a Forbes contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. And I'm always excited when we're able to have one of the world experts on impact investing on the show. And we have one of the world experts on impact investing today. We have Paula Goldman from Omidyar Network. Paula, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here today.
Well, you helped write a report for Omidyar Network about impact investing, and it really seems that some of the observations in the report are pretty optimistic about where we are in the world and the cycle of impact investing. And for instance, you suggest we're at a tipping point, and that we'll see in the next year some real big expansion in impact investing. Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, Devin, I have spent a lot of time looking at social movements and how social movements take off. And I am confident that impact investing is at this tipping point, right? Where we've got all these high-profile champions that have accrued in the last few years, from the Pope to Bill Gates. But we're still at a small fraction of assets under management, still like 1%. Less than 1%. But this is the moment. This is when we look forward to 2016, this is the year in which all of this enthusiasm and interest is being converted into action. And an early sign of that is what happened in the last few weeks with the announcement of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, which drew so much attention. When we're saying 99% of Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook shares are going to go to the betterment of mankind. But by the way, it's going to go into an LLC and it's going to include impact investing. That's a $45 billion commitment, some of which is going to impact investing. And we expect to see a lot more of that in the year to come.
Yeah, by some measures, you go back even 2 years ago, there wasn't anywhere near 45 billion in total global impact investment assets. So it's a huge dollar amount. Paul, why do you think there's been some controversy around the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative?
So it's interesting. I, for one, am super heartened by the curiosity and the attention. People from all walks of life, mainstream media, taking a notice and saying, that's so, this is going to an LLC. What does that mean, right? And the truth is, this is what Omidyar Network did 11 years ago, right? When Pierre and Pam Omidyar decided to get into the game of philanthropy, they very quickly realized that it was super important to use markets as a tool for social good and not just grant making. That these two tools together, for-profit investments in mission-driven companies and nonprofit grant making, could be extremely powerful complements to each other. But when we got started, it's not like everyone said, oh, I totally get it. I understand what you want to do. Some people got it. Some people had to watch and wait and see. And 11 years later, we've deployed something like $900 million, about half of which has gone to mission-driven for-profits, half to nonprofits, and a lot of impact in areas like education and financial inclusion. But that model is catching fire. It is a different model than traditional philanthropy. And so I frankly think it's fantastic that people are watching this, that there was such a high profile signal from the Zuckerbergs around this model being the wave of the future. And it's very healthy that people are examining it and questioning it and trying to make sense of it. It means that we're likely to have even more people follow suit.
But it is certainly exciting to see the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative capture so much of their personal wealth. Obviously, it's not 100%, but it's a huge portion of their total wealth, presuming they don't have, they probably don't have nearly as much invested outside of the Facebook stock as they have in the Facebook stock. So it's very exciting. One of the things that you talk about really is closely related to this again, and that is the next generation profile of investors, the people who are controlling assets, have a different mentality, a different mindset than prior generations. And of course, I'm old enough to certainly look at Zuckerberg as being part of the next generation, and he may be just a little bit older than some, but not much. Certainly a generation Y, a millennial kind of an entrepreneur. So what do you see as being typical of that generation's investment strategy?
Look, for 100 years or more, we've operated as a society with this mentality of go make money on the one hand and give a small fraction of it away to do good on the other hand later in life. And what we're seeing increasingly is that millennials and next gens are saying, no, I don't buy this. I think we can marry these two goals, that we can start earlier in life, and that we can we can do good and do well at the same time, that we can use for-profit investments as a tool for social good, not to replace the grant making, but in complement. And that's, it's interesting, in so many of these cases where we're seeing new champions for impact investing, it really is millennials and next gens that are driving the conversation. I was thinking about BlackRock, which recently announced, largest asset manager in the world, announced an impact investing commitment. And there was this fascinating New York Times article where it articulated how a lot of that was driven by millennial champions inside the BlackRock office, who were actually advocating for this change and got it adopted at the highest levels. Similarly, we saw in the last month or two, Howard W. Buffett, the grandson of Warren Buffett, announced a new impact investing firm. These are all advanced signals of how millennials expect to deploy their capital and the great demand for impact investing that's coming from them. And when we combine that with the trillions of dollars in wealth transfer, the unprecedented wealth transfer that's about to happen to millennials, we're about to see a sea change.
One of the things that I see from my vantage point is that each generation, as it rises, tends not only to define itself, but to redefine older generations to some extent. Are you also seeing that? Are you seeing greater social awareness among older investors as well now?
Indeed. And I think it's really across generations, and it's across folks from different walks of life. But where we're seeing, in addition to the younger generations that I just talked about, we're also seeing it from folks that are business leaders, everyone from Reid Hoffman to Richard Branson to Bill Gates. All of these are folks who have deployed their personal capital into really exciting businesses that are driving change in the world, like change.org, which does online petitions, or Bridge International Academies, which does affordable education for low-income folks in East Africa. There's so much of this popping up, and it's really capturing attention from all corners.
Well, and as it should. One of the interesting observations you made about impact investing was the idea that capital and technology are coming together to create really exciting innovation in emerging markets. And I think you look particularly at the increasing ubiquity of smartphones and the impact that will have on the developing world. That really is an exciting, I think, trend, an exciting sign. Give us more detail about your thinking.
Yeah, so Devin, up until this point in the conversation, we've been talking about the investing side. When we turn to the innovation side, the entrepreneurial side, we expect the next big wave of innovation that's going to, have tons of social impact to come from emerging markets and to be designed around the needs of what we call low and middle income, groups in emerging markets. So these are folks that are not the poorest of the poor, but that are still in danger of falling back into poverty. But they have disposable income and they have mobile phones, which means that you can build businesses to serve them. For example, these are folks that don't have access to loans or credit. So they can't go start a business. They can't finance their own university education. But if they do have a mobile phone, we can use their social media data to create new ways for them to get credit, new credit scoring mechanisms for them to get credit and to take out that $800,000 loan to go to university. That's the kind of business model innovation that we're seeing and investing in. And that's the kind of innovation that's going to lift. I mean, there are billions of people in this income bracket in emerging markets that's going to lift these people into the middle class, into more stable lives where their futures just look a lot brighter.
Yeah. You said something interesting and somewhat accidentally. You sort of said $800,000 student loans, and I want to be clear that I think you meant $800 to $1,000.
Yes.
Not that we would have people in the developing world who haven't previously had access to credit who will now be borrowing nearly $1 million to go to school.
No,
right?
Thank you. Yes, $800 to $1,000.
Now, yeah, but $800 to $1,000 of the right for the right thing can be life altering, right?
Exactly.
We can move people squarely into a stable middle class situation with a very small amount of money, and so it is exciting to think about how these smartphones and other technologies will allow things to evolve. And I've heard and love to get your take on this, but as smartphones get cheaper, I would expect them to reach right to the end of the row, so to speak, that we would actually see people, goat herders in Kenya and goat herders in Nepal with smartphones. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think we're already starting to see that. And I should mention that, we spend a lot of time analyzing these trends and the exciting entrepreneurs that are popping up, and a lot of that's available on our website, which is omidyarnetwork.com. This report that you're referring to, the Frontier Capital report, that really lays out this next wave of innovation and how it's going to change, the lives of billions.
Fantastic. Well, Paula, I hate to abuse the privilege, but I want to get some personal insights from you because you are so well respected in impact investing circles, and I hope you don't mind, but you are clearly well regarded. You are well respected. You are, in fact, a role model to many. Who inspires you? Who's your role model?
One person that comes to mind, there are many, Devin, but one person that comes to mind is Clara Miller, who is president of the Heron Foundation. And Clara has done something fairly radical, which is most foundations operate, they may have hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars in their endowment, and they say, oh, that's off limits. We're just going to give away 5% every year for social impact. Now, Clara got into the presidency of the Heron Foundation, looked at her mission, which was to combat poverty in the United States, came to the recognition that poverty really was still a big problem, and that 5% of their endowment every year was not going to necessarily move the needle on the problem, and said, how can we use 100% of our assets? How can we use all of the endowment and all of our grant-making capacity? Instead of looking at the endowment as something separate, she started the light bulb went off, and she said, I can invest in, low-income housing and still return money to the endowment and advance my mission. I can invest in job creation by funding businesses in areas where it might be more difficult to get funding, et cetera, et cetera. And this kind of shift, which takes real courage, I think is the kind of shift we all want to see, right? We've all been sold this story that says, go make a lot of money and then in the margins do good. And she's saying, we're going to unite this fully. These are the same thing. All investing is impact investing. And I'm just personally moved by that courage, that kind of willingness to be ahead of mainstream practice, because I think it's a real example for all of us.
Well, that really is a perfect example of someone that we can be inspired by, and I appreciate you sharing that. Why does impact investing and philanthropy inspire you personally? What's inside that makes this relevant and exciting to you?
Devin, so I spend a lot of time, I was born in Indonesia. I was born in Singapore. We lived in Indonesia as a kid. I spent a lot of time in emerging markets. I spent a lot of time in startups, both for-profit and nonprofit in emerging markets. And it is really hard to build a mission-driven company. I worked with an education startup in rural India. I worked on post-war reconstruction in Bosnia. And in that process, I just realized how hard it is to build a nonprofit, how hard it is to get income streams that make that sustainable. And if we can open up new sources of capital that will, if you think about all the great people in the world that are trying to make a difference, but just can't access the money to make their visions real. If we can open up new sources of capital with impact investing, it will make such a difference to their ability to scale their impact. I felt that personally working in these organizations and helping to drive them. And now I'm on the other side of that equation, opening up these new sources of capital so that change makers around the world have more options and more ability to make a difference.
Fantastic. Well, that I get your personal connection to this now. I really appreciate that. And I think that helps us to understand what motivates and drives you. Everyone who's watching wants to do one thing, and that is to do more good. However they go about that, whatever their big goal is in life, they want to do more good. I call this an impact hack. What tip could you give us to help us do more good?
A couple come to mind. So let me start with one, and we can keep going. But the first is, we get a lot of people coming to us saying, I have this idea that I think could be really impactful, but I'm not sure. Should I start a nonprofit or a for-profit? And we always say to them, problem first, tool second. So what's the problem you're trying to solve? And do you feel like there's a business model behind it? And if so, how healthy of a business model? Can it support a for-profit? And if not, maybe there's a nonprofit and you can develop some income streams around that to make it more sustainable. But I think people get a little caught up in the mechanics of it instead of starting with the problem itself. And oftentimes when we back up there, it really helps move things along and resolve a lot of confusion.
Oh, fantastic. That is a great insight. And I think that is a guiding principle at Omidyar Network, right? It's part of your model to solve problems and look at the tools that you have available in solving them, if I recall from our prior conversation.
Very core to our model. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Paula, thank you so much for being with us. Before we wrap up, please tell us exactly how people can find that report and learn more about the work of Omidyar Network.
Sure. So our website is omidyarnetwork.com, and the Frontier Capital Report is on the home page, so they can download it right there. And we hope they'll give us their feedback and comments, and that we can learn from what they're learning as well.
Fantastic. Well, Paula, again, thank you so much for being with us today. We wish you every success in the great work you're doing.
Thank you. My pleasure, and likewise.
All righty. Let's do some good.